Okay, welcome back everyone. This is week 2 of our strategic management course, and I have to say this is one of my favorite weeks to teach because today we shift from theory to something you can actually use the moment you walk into a boardroom and sit down with a client or even just pick up a business news article and read it with different eye. Okay, so last week we laid the foundation and also I uploaded Mike Potter's lecture video, maybe 1 hour duration, quite long, but I hope everyone enjoy it because Michael Porter is so classic and important person to understand the strategy management itself. Anyway, so last week we talked about what strategy is and why it is important to study for the strategy management. Uh, And also we talked about the competitive advantage also, right? Okay, so and today we distinguish between corporate strategy, what business should we be in, and business level strategy. How do we compete within a given business? And we introduce the basic idea that strategy is fundamentally about making choices, where to play and how to win. But here is the thing about choices. You can only make good choices if you understand the environment in which those choices will be made. A chess player who does not study the board before moving is not playing chess. They are just moving pieces. And that is exactly what this week is about. So today we study the board. We study the external environment. So external analysis is the, sorry, what happened with this? Hmm. Okay, so why it does not work? Okay, something wrong. Hmm, I don't know what happens. Voila, yes, it works. Okay, so external analysis is a so everything happening outside the firm that creates opportunities you can exploit and the threats you must prepare for. So now I want to be honest with you from the start. The tools we are going to cover today, as I already explained last week, PESTEL, pastel, and POTOS, five forces model. So strategic growth and the industry life cycle also I'm gonna cover all these topics. Um, Actually, these two tools and also many strategic tools are not the magic ones. So no framework will ever hand you the right strategy on a silver platter. So what this framework do is sharpen your thinking. So they give you a structured way to ask better questions, to avoid blind spots, and to spot patterns that less disciplined thinkers will miss. So that's their true value. So let me walk you through our agenda for today. So we have three major sections. Uh, First, we will cover the PASTEL, PESTEL framework. This is the first part for today, so which is a comprehensive tool for scanning the macroeconomics. Macro itself. Okay. So the big external forces that affect every industry simultaneously. And second, we will dive deep into Porter's five forces. This is the second part for today's lecture. The most famous framework in competitive strategy, which helps you understand the structural attractiveness of an industry. And third, we will explore the concept of strategic groups and the industry life cycle, so which add even more nuance to how we think about competition and positioning over time. So by the end of today, you should be able to pick up almost any industry, airlines, pharmaceutical, streaming video, fast food, semiconductors, you name it, and conduct a rigorous external analysis. So you will know what questions to ask, what data to look for, and how to interpret what you find. So that's a genuinely powerful skill. So let us get started. Okay, so part one, passive framework. Um, so before we define this tool, so let us make sure we are clear on exactly what we mean by the macro environment itself. So the macro environment refers to all the broad contextual forces that operate beyond any single industry or firm. So these are not forces that any individual company can control or even significantly influence. They are the weather system within which every business must operate. So think of in this way. Imagine you are a farmer. Imagine you are a farmer. You can choose what crops to plant, when to irrigate, which fertilizer to use, and how to optimize your harvest. You have real control over your farm level decisions, but you cannot control the climate, and also you cannot control whether it rains or drought. So whether global commodity prices rise or fall, or whether a new government policy imposes restrictions on land use. So those macro forces will affect your farm whether you like it or not. Businesses are exactly the same. So farmer case and business case is extremely same. For example, so a company can optimize its operations, hire brilliant people, and design brilliant products. But if a recession hits, if a new regulation bans its core product, if the demographic shifts dry up its customer base, no amount of internal optimization will save it if it has not anticipated and prepared for those changes. So this is why external analysis is not optional. It is existential. Okay, so I'm gonna write it right here. So, so that's why external analysis is not optional. It is what? Existential. Okay. Okay, so now here is an important distinction that sometimes trips students up. The macro environment is not the same as the competitive environment. The competitive environment, so which we will cover in part 2 with POTUS 5 forces. Mhm. So I'm going to write it also for competitive environment. So we'll cover the in part 2 with the fire force model. So which deals with the specific dynamics of a particular industry, who the competitors are, so how buyers behave, and so on. So the macro environment is one level up. It affects all industries, so it affects them differently. Okay, so for example, a rise in interest rate is macroeconomic force. It affects every industry, but it hits the housing industry very differently from the way it hits the gaming industry. A housing company is devastated when mortgage rates spike. A gaming company, maybe not so much. The people might even play more video games during an economic slowdown. The same macro force, very different industry implications. The job of the strategist is to figure out what those implications are for your specific industry and firm. Okay, so how do we systematically scan the macro environment? So this is where this analysis, PESTEL analysis, comes in. So this analysis is an acronym that stands for political, economic, social technological factor, and environmental and legal factors. So it is a checklist. It's for ensuring that you do not miss any major categories of macro level forces. Okay, so the framework has been around since at least the 1960s. It's quite old, of course. It's classic, but still useful. So thought in various forms and under various names. You may also have heard of PEST, which is just pastel without environmental and legal categories. Mhm. Um, or also someone changed the letter PESTLE, so which is just slight reordering of the same letters. But don't worry about the variants. The core idea is always the same. Systematically examine the six major categories of macro forces. Okay? So now I want to be clear about how to use this analysis tool properly because many students use it incorrectly. Even many managers, many consultants also use this analysis incorrectly. Uh, This analysis tool is a scanning tool, so not an analysis tool actually. So this means your job is not just to list what is happening in each category. So any junior analyst or consultant can compile a list of political trends or economic indicators. That's not strategy. That's not strategy. Okay? So your job is to assess relevance and significance. Which of these forces actually matter for your industry, in what direction they are pushing things, how quickly, and what the strategic implications are. Uh, so let me give the metaphor. Imagine you are a doctor examining a patient. So you could run every test imaginable. So blood test, X-ray, MRI, genetics sequencing, um, like that, everything. So you would have an amount of data. So, but a good doctor does not just recite the test results. A good doctor interprets them, right? So which results are normal? Which are abnormal? Which abnormal ones are actually worrying versus just a statistical noise. So what do they mean for this particular patient, given their age, lifestyle, and history? So that interpretative step is where the real medical skill lies. So and the same is true for PEST, yeah, pastel instead. Okay, so let us start with the P, political factor. The political factors refers to the role of government and political institutions in shaping the business environment. So this includes the things like government stability, policy making, trade regulations, tax policies, political ideologies, and the relationship between government and business. Political analysis matters because governments are among the most powerful actor in any economy. So government has a huge power actually, right? So they set the rules of the game. So they can open markets or close them, incentivize industry or penalize them, create infrastructure that enables commerce or fail to create it. So no serious strategy can ignore the political landscape. So the good example is the um, U.S. case. Everyone know that because Trump deals with the tariff. So this is the good example for the political factor, I think. Anyway, Um, let me give you some more concrete example. So think about the global semiconductor industry. In recent years, governments around the world, particularly the United States, the European Union, South Korea, and China, they have made semiconductors a matter of national security and industrial policy. So the U.S. CHIPS Act passed in 2020 to committed over $52 billion in subsidies to encourage domestic semiconductor manufacturing. Why? Because the political conclusion was that relying on foreign suppliers, particularly Taiwan, which faces ongoing tensions with China, so posed an acceptable national security risk. So now, if you are a semiconductor company, say you are TSMC or what is that? Intel, right? Or a smaller chip designer. So those political decisions are not background noise. They fundamentally reshape where you build factories, how much of your R&D is government subsidized, who your customers can be, and what supply chains are legally permissible. The political factors of the highest order. So another example is that the pharmacy industry, the drug pricing, approval processes, um, patent protection, and healthcare regulations are all subject to intense political debate in virtually every country. A firm like Pfizer or Roche must navigate not just the scientific and commercial challenges, but an incredibly complex political environment. So, congressional hearings, international pricing negotiations, intellectual property disputes between developed and developing nations. The political environment is not peripheral to pharmaceutical strategy. It is central. Uh, Also, mm, the lobbying and political influence are also important dimensions of a political environment, actually. So many large industries invest heavily in lobbying activities, especially in the US. Well, actually, not only for the US, but US is a quite big market for the lobbying market. Anyway, so and hiring professional lobbyists, making campaign contributions, the funding industry associations to shape political and regulatory outcomes in their favor. The tobacco industry spent decades lobbying against smoking restrictions. The fossil fuel industry has invested significantly in shaping climate policy debate. The financial service industry lobbies extensively on regulations and taxation. So understanding who has political influence in an industry and how that influence is being used is a meaningful part of political analysis. So when analyzing political factor P, you should ask, so what is the current political climate toward our industry? Okay, and are governments supportive, hostile, or indifferent? What policies are being debated that could affect us? What is the level of political stability in our key markets? Are there trade agreements or disputes that affect our supply chains or market access? Are there elections coming up that could shift policy direction? And importantly, what are other powerful actors in our industry doing to shape the political environment? And should we be doing more? Okay, so um, next is the economic factor. But before going to the economic factor, um, maybe it's better to take the break.